Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to, I think, day 25. Day 25 of our Bhakti Vaibhava seminar on Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4. And we are in now, let me just have a look. We've just come to chapter 11. Chapter 11 is titled, Swayambhuva Manu advises Dhruva Maharaj to stop fighting. Because if you remember, Dhruva, his brother was killed by a yaksha. His brother was Uttama, was killed by a yaksha, so Dhruva decided to punish the yakshas. So he just attacked the yakshas and he was slaughtering them, just devastating them completely. Just completely. And so now, Swayambhuva Manu, this, as the chapter title says, Swayambhuva Manu advises Dhruva Maharaj to stop fighting. So Swayambhuva Manu is going to come and intervene like this, rather than have Dhruva just destroy all the yakshas. Okay, so this chapter then, it actually only has 2 sections. It's only 35 verses, which is not a lot, of course. But 2 sections. First section is from verse 1 to verse 5, and we call that Dhruva Maharaj overcomes the mystical show of the yakshas. Because at the end of the previous chapter 10, Dhruva was winning and he was destroying them left and right. So then they started a big whole mystical attack with all sorts of just amazing, magical, mystical things. Then the second section is from verse 6 to verse 35. Swayambhuva Manu comes and preaches to Dhruva. Right, let's begin, but first of all, let us chant our prayers. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschachya Deshatarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripas sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Right, so let's begin section 1, verse 1 to verse 5. Dhruva Maharaj overcomes the mystical show of the yakshas. Let's have a quick look here. Yeah, there's quite a bit of purport here. So we'll just begin. I'll read through all the verses first of all. Verse 1. Sri Maitreya said, My dear Vidura, when Dhruva Maharaj heard the encouraging words of the great sages, he performed the Achman by touching water, and then took up his arrow made by Lord Narayan and fixed it upon his bow. Verse 2. As soon as Dhruva Maharaj joined the Narayan Astra arrow to his bow, the illusion created by the yakshas was immediately vanquished. Just as all material pains and pleasures are vanquished when one becomes fully cognizant of the self. Verse 3. Even as Dhruva fixed the weapon made by Narayan Rishi onto his bow, arrows with golden shafts and feathers, like the wings of a swan, flew out from it. Wow. They entered the enemy soldiers with a great hissing sound. just as peacocks enter a forest with tumultuous crowing. Verse 4, those sharp arrows dismayed the enemy soldiers, who became almost unconscious. But various yakshas on the battlefield, in a rage against Dhruva Maharaj, somehow or other collected their weapons and attacked. Just as serpents agitated by Garuda rushed towards Garuda with upraised hoods, all the yaksha soldiers prepared to overcome Dhruva Maharaj with their upraised weapons. Verse 5. When Dhruva Maharaj saw the yakshas coming forward, he immediately took his arrows and cut the enemies to pieces, separating their arms, legs, heads, and bellies from their bodies. He delivered the yakshas to the planetary system, which is situated above the sun globe, and which is attainable only by first-class brahmacharis, who have never discharged their semen. Okay, so there we go, devotees. Those are the verses. Let's go back and go through the verses again with their purports. Verse 1, Sri Maitreya said, "My dear Vidura, when Dhruva Maharaj heard the encouraging words of the great sages, he performed the archman by touching water, and then took up his arrow made by Lord Narayan and fixed it upon his bow." So we'll have a look at the purport now. Prabhupada makes the point that Dhruva was given that arrow by Lord Vishnu, and he fixed it to his bow. The idea was to finish the illusions created by the yakshas. Bhagavad Gita 7:14, Daivihyesha Gunamayi Mama Maya Rachaya, says that without the Lord no one can overcome the illusory energy. Lord Chaitanya has given us a weapon, the chanting of the holy names. This is the Narayan Astra weapon to drive away Maya, in pursuance of associates of Lord Chaitanya, like Lord Nityananda and Advaita Acharya. Verse 2. As soon as Dhruva Maharaj joined the Narayan Astra arrow to his bow, the illusion created by the yakshas was immediately vanquished, just as all material pains and pleasures are vanquished when one becomes fully cognizant of the self. So there's a purport here, let's have a look. Krishna is like the sun, Maya is darkness. Krishna Surya Sama Maya Haya Andaka. Darkness, Prabhupada says, darkness means absence of light. Similarly, Maya means absence of Krishna consciousness. So actually Krishna consciousness and Maya are always side by side, but as soon as Krishna consciousness is awakened, all illusory pains and pleasures of material life are vanquished. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, Mayam etam taranti te. That's from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, verse 14, which we started reciting a couple of minutes ago. So means constant chanting of the Mahamantra will keep us always aloof from the illusory energy of Maya. Verse 3. Even as Dhruva Maharaj fixed the weapon made by Narayan Rishi onto his bow, arrows with golden shafts and feathers like the wings of a swan flew out from it. They entered the enemy soldiers with a great hissing sound, just as peacocks enter a forest with tumultuous crowing. 4. Those sharp arrows dismayed the enemy soldiers, who became almost unconscious. But various yakshas on the battlefield, in a rage against Dhruva Maharaj, somehow or other collected their weapons and attacked. just as serpents agitated by Garuda rush towards Garuda with upraised hoods. All the Yaksha soldiers prepared to overcome Dhruva Maharaj with their upraised weapons. Verse 5, when Dhruva Maharaj saw the Yakshas coming forward, he immediately took his arrows and cut the enemies to pieces, separating their arms, legs, heads, and bellies from their bodies. He delivered the Yakshas. He delivered the Yakshas to the planetary system, which is situated above the sun globe, and which is attainable only by first-class brahmacharis who have never discharged their semen. Right, okay, so there's a more substantial purport here. Prabhupada begins by saying that to be killed, if anyone is killed by the Lord or by his devotee, it's auspicious for non-devotees. So the Yakshas that Dhruva killed went to the planets of the brahmacharis who've never discharged semen. As the impersonalists or yogis killed by Lord attain Brahmaloka, persons killed by the Lord's devotee also go there. To reach there, one has to be elevated above the sun. So therefore killing is not always bad if it's done by the Lord or a devotee or in a great sacrifice. It is great benefit for the entity killed. Material non-violence is insignificant compared to killing by the Lord or his devotees. Even when a murderer is killed by the king or the government, he's benefited. He becomes cleared of all sinful reactions. Second paragraph. So an important word here is urva retasa, means brahmacharis who never discharge semen. And you may remember we came across this word just a few days ago. So anyway, let's continue through the purport, second paragraph. Celibacy is so important that even if you don't do Vedic austerity, etc., if you simply stay celibate with no discharging of semen, you go to Brahmaloka. Prabhupada says generally sex life is the cause of all misery. So in Vedic civilization, sex life is restricted. Only grihastas have sex life. It's restricted. All others don't. Brahmacharis, vanaprasthas, sannyasis. But unfortunately, people don't know the value of not discharging semen. Therefore, they're entangled in material qualities and suffer the struggle for existence. So actually this term urdhva retasa especially refers to Mayavadis who are very austere. That's part of their whole program, extreme austerity. But in Bhagavad Gita chapter 8 verse 16, the Lord says, even if you go to Brahmaloka, you come back. So real mukti, like permanent mukti, is only possible by devotional service. By devotional service, you can go beyond Brahmaloka to the spiritual world, wherefrom you don't come back. So the Mayavadi sannyasis are very proud of becoming liberated, but the actual liberation is only possible through the touch of the Lord in devotional service. So Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, it is said, Harim vina na mritim taranti. Without Krishna's mercy, no one can have liberation. So we finished the first section. Now we go on to the second section, which is the rest of the whole chapter. From verse 6 to verse 35. Swayambhuva Manu comes and preaches to Dhruva. Right, it's a long section, so we definitely have to read all the verses first. Verse 6. When Swayambhuva Manu saw that his grandson Dhruva Maharaj was killing so many of the yakshas who were not actually offenders, out of his great compassion he approached Dhruva with great sages to give him good instruction. Verse 7. Lord Manu said, "My dear son, please stop. It is not good to become unnecessarily angry. It is the path to hellish life. Now you are going beyond the limit by killing yakshas who are actually not offenders." Verse 8. My dear son, the killing of the sinless yakshas which you have undertaken is not at all approved by authorities, and it does not befit our family, which is supposed to know the laws of religion and irreligion. Verse 9. My dear son, it has been proved that you are very much affectionate towards your brother and are greatly aggrieved at his being killed by the yakshas. But just consider, for one yaksha's offense, you have killed many others who are innocent. Verse 10. One should not accept the body as the self, and thus, like the animals, kill the bodies of others. This is especially forbidden by saintly persons who follow the path of devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Verse 11. It is very difficult to achieve the spiritual abode of Hari in the Vaikuntha planets. But you are so fortunate that you're already destined to go to that abode by worshipping him as the supreme abode of all living entities. Verse 12. Because you're a pure devotee of the Lord is always thinking of you, and you're also recognized by all his confidential devotees. Your life is meant for exemplary behavior. I'm therefore surprised. Why have you undertaken such an abominable task? Verse 13. The Lord is very satisfied with his devotee when the devotee greets other people with tolerance, mercy, friendship, and equality. Verse 14. One who actually satisfies the Supreme Personality of Godhead during one's lifetime becomes liberated from the gross and subtle material bodies. Thus, being freed from all material modes of nature, he achieves unlimited spiritual bliss. 15. The creation of the material world begins with the 5 elements, and thus everything, including the body of a man or a woman, is created of these elements. By the sexual life of man and woman, the number of men and women in this material world is further increased. Verse 16. Manu continued, My dear King Dhruva, it is simply by the illusory material energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and by the interaction of the 3 modes of material nature that creation, maintenance, and annihilation take place. Verse 17. My dear Dhruva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is uncontaminated by the material modes of nature. He is the remote cause of the creation of this material cosmic manifestation. When he gives the impetus, many other causes and effects are produced, and thus the whole universe moves, just as iron moves by the integrated force of a magnet. Verse 18. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, by his inconceivable supreme energy, time causes the interaction of the three modes of material nature, and thus varieties of energy become manifest. It appears that he's acting, but he is not the actor. He is killing, but he is not the killer. Thus it is understood that only by his inconceivable power is everything happening. Verse 19, my dear Dhruva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is ever existing, but in the form of time he's the killer of everything. He has no beginning, although he's the beginning of everything, nor is he ever exhaustible, although everything is exhausted in due course of time. The living entities are created through the agency of the Father and killed through the agency of death. But he, the Supreme Lord, he is perpetually free of birth and death. Verse 20, the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his feature of eternal time is present in the material world and is neutral towards everyone. No one is his ally and no one is his enemy. Within the jurisdiction of the time element, everyone enjoys or suffers the result of his own kava, or fruit of karma, or fruit of activities. As when the wind blows, small particles of dust fly in the air. So according to one's particular karma, one suffers or enjoys material life. Verse 21. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, is all-powerful, and he awards the results of one's fruit of activities. Thus, although one living entity's duration of life is very small, whereas that of another is very great, he is always in his transcendental position, and there is no question of lessening or increasing his duration of life. Verse 22. The differentiation among varieties of life and their suffering and enjoyment is explained by some to be the result of karma. Others say it's due to nature, others due to time, others due to fate, and still others say that it is due to desire. Verse 23. The absolute truth transcendence is never subject to the understanding of imperfect sensory endeavor, nor is he subject to direct experience. He is the master of varieties of energies, like the full material energy, and no one can understand his plans or actions. Therefore it should be concluded that although he's the original cause of all causes, no one can know him by mental speculation. Verse 24. My dear son, those yakshas who are descendants of Kuvera are not actually the killers of your brother. The birth and death of every living entity are caused by the Supreme, who is certainly the cause of all causes. Verse 25. The Supreme Personality of Godhead creates this material world, maintains it, and annihilates it in due course of time. But because he is transcendental to such activities, he's never affected by ego in such action or by the modes of material nature. Verse 26, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the Supersoul of all living entities. He is the controller and maintainer of everyone. Through the agency of his external energy, he creates, maintains, and annihilates everyone. Verse 27, my dear boy Dhruva, please surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the ultimate goal of the progress of the world. Everyone, including the demigods headed by Lord Brahma, is working under his control, just as a ball, prompted by a rope in its nose, is controlled by its owner. Verse 28, My dear Dhruva, at the age of only 5 years, you were very grievously afflicted by the words of your mother's co-wife, and you very boldly gave up the protection of your mother and went to the forest to engage in the yogic process for realization of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As a result of this, you've already achieved the topmost position in all the 3 worlds. Verse 29, my dear Dhruva, please therefore turn your attention to the Supreme Person, who is the infallible Brahman. Face the Supreme Personality of Godhead in your original position, and thus, by self-realization, you will find this material differentiation to be merely flickering. Verse 30, thus regaining your natural position and rendering service unto the Supreme Lord, who is the all-powerful reservoir of all pleasure, and who lives in all living entities as the Supersoul, you will very soon forget the illusory understanding of I and mine. So verse 31, my dear King, just consider what I've said to you, which will act as medicinal treatment upon disease. Control your anger, for anger is the foremost enemy on the path of spiritual realization. I wish all good fortune for you. Please follow my instructions. Verse 32, a person who desires liberation from this material world should not fall under the control of anger, because when bewildered by anger, one becomes a source of dread for all others. 33, my dear Dhruva, you thought that the yakshas killed your body, and therefore you have killed great numbers of them. But by this action you have agitated the mind of Lord Shiva's brother Kuvera, who's the treasurer of the demigods. Please note that your actions have been very disrespectful to Kuvera and Lord Shiva. Verse 34, for this reason, my son, you should immediately pacify Kuvera with gentle words and prayers, and thus his wrath may not affect our family. 35. Thus Swayambhuva Manu, after giving instruction to Dhruva Maharaj, his grandson, received respectful obeisances from him. Then Lord Manu and the great sages went back to their respective homes. Very good. So let us go back to verse 6. Here we are. So it's the second section, verse 6 to verse 35. Swayambhuva Manu comes and preaches to Dhruva Maharaj. Verse 6. When Swayambhuva Manu saw that his grandson Dhruva Maharaj was killing so many of the yakshas who were not actually offenders, out of his great compassion he approached Dhruva with great sages to give him good instruction. So there's just a little bit of purport here. It was only one yaksha who was guilty of killing Dhruva's brother, but still Dhruva just declared war on everyone. Sometimes these days this happens. For one man's fault, a whole country's attacked. This wholesale attack, not approved by Manu. He's the father and lawgiver of humanity, so he wanted to stop Dhruva killing yakshas who were not offenders. Verse 7, Lord Manu said, my dear son, please stop. It is not good to become unnecessarily angry, as it is the path to hellish life. Now you are going beyond the limit by killing yakshas who are actually not offenders. So there's a purport here. A couple of paragraphs. The word atiroshena means with unnecessary anger. When Dhruva went beyond the limits of necessary anger, his grandfather Swayambhuva Manu wanted to protect him from further sinful action. From this we understand that killing is not bad, but when done unnecessarily, or if offenceless persons are killed, this opens the way to hell. And Dhruva Maharaj was saved from such sinful action because he was a great devotee. So second paragraph, a Kshatriya is allowed to kill only to maintain law and order in the state. He is not allowed to kill or do violence without reason. Such violence leads to hell, or violence leads to hell. But it's also required to maintain law and order. So Manu prohibited Dhruva from killing those who were not guilty. But in modern warfare, attacks are made on the innocent citizens. Plus, countries maintain slaughterhouses. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, when a person is attacked, when a nation is attacked by its enemies, the wholesale slaughter of the citizens should be taken as a reaction to their own sinful activities. That is nature's law. Verse 8, my dear son, the killing of the sinless yakshas, which you have undertaken, is not at all approved by authorities, and it does not befit our family, which is supposed to know the laws of religion and irreligion. Verse 9, there's no purport to verse 8. My dear son, it has been proved that you are very much affectionate towards your brother, and are greatly aggrieved at his being killed by the yakshas. But just consider, for one yaksha's offense you have killed many others who are innocent. 10. One should not accept the body as the self, and thus, like the animals, kill the bodies of others. This is especially forbidden for saintly persons who follow the path of devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Okay, so there's a purport here. Prabhupada says the words sadhunam rishikesh anuvartinam are very significant. Sadhu means saintly person. But who's a saintly person? It's one who serves the Lord. So Narada Pancharatra is quoted, Rishikena, Rishikesha, etc. Means the process of favorable devotional service to the Lord by our senses is called Bhakti, or devotional service. So why should a devotee engage in personal sense gratification? Dhruva advised that he's a pure servitor of the Lord, so why should he engage in the bodily conception of life? An animal thinks the body of another animal is his food, so he attacks him. As a human, especially a devotee, should not do this. A sadhu is not supposed to kill animals unnecessarily. Verse 11. It is very difficult to achieve the spiritual abode of Hari in the Vaikuntha planets, but you are so fortunate that you're already destined to go to that abode by worshipping him as the supreme abode of all living entities. So there's a short purport here. The bodies of living entities cannot exist without the shelter of the soul and supersoul. So seeing anything material or spiritual is dependent on the Lord. The Lord referred to here as Bhutavas. Dhruva Maharaj as a Kshatriya could have argued with Manu when told to stop fighting, could have said it was his duty to fight as a Kshatriya. But he was informed that every living entity is the residence of the Lord, temple of the Lord, so unnecessary killing of any living entity is not permitted. Verse 12. Because you're a pure devotee of the Lord is always thinking of you, and you're also recognized by all his confidential devotees. Your life is meant for exemplary behavior. I'm therefore surprised. Why have you undertaken such an abominable task? So purport, first paragraph of the purport, well, it's only just a short purport. So Dhruva is a pure devotee. He's used to thinking of the Lord. And reciprocally, the Lord thinks of the devotee who thinks of him 24 hours a day. A pure devotee doesn't know anything other than him. So the Lord doesn't know anything beyond the pure devotee. Manu is pointing this out to Dhruva. You're not only a pure devotee, but you're recognized by all pure devotees. So therefore, Dhruva should act in an exemplary way so others can learn from him and follow in his footsteps. So Prabhupada says, under the circumstances, it's surprising that you've killed so many faultless yakshas. The Lord is very satisfied with his devotee when the devotee greets other people with tolerance, mercy, friendship, and equality. So, Prabhupada says in the purport, the duty of an advanced Madhyam Adhikari is to act in accordance with this verse. There are 3 stages in devotional service. The first and the second are described as follows. Next point, sometimes devotees are ill-treated by envious people. But the advanced devotee should be tolerant, should show complete mercy to the ignorant or the innocent. The preacher devotee is meant to show mercy to the innocent people and elevate them to devotional service. Everyone's constitutionally the eternal servant of the Lord, so the devotee's business is to awaken everyone's Krishna consciousness. That is his mercy. With equals, he should show friendship. In general, he should see every living entity as part of the Lord. There are different dresses, but Bhagavad Gita says the learned people sees them equally. The Lord greatly appreciates a devotee who treats others like this. So it's said, a devotee is always tolerant and merciful, a friend to all, never an enemy, always peaceful. These are some of the qualities of a devotee. Verse 14, one who actually satisfies the Supreme Personality of Godhead during one's lifetime becomes liberated from the gross and subtle material conditions, thus being free from all material modes of nature. He achieves unlimited spiritual bliss. Yes, so let's go through the purport of this verse 14. So the previous verse said that one should treat all living entities with tolerance, mercy, friendship, equality, and in this way one satisfies the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and when he's satisfied, the devotee immediately becomes free from all material conditions. The Lord confirms this in Bhagavad Gita. Anyone who sincerely and seriously engages in my service immediately becomes situated in the transcendental stage, wherein he can enjoy unlimited spiritual bliss. So here, of course, everyone's struggling hard to become blissful, but they don't know how. The atheists don't believe in God. They certainly don't please him. So here it's clearly said that when you please the Lord, you immediately come to the spiritual platform and you enjoy blissful life. Prabhupada says, to become free from material existence means to become free from the influence of material nature. Right, so there is a second paragraph here. Let's have a look. The word samprasane, which is used in this verse, means being satisfied. So we should act in such a way that the Lord is satisfied with our activities. We don't need to satisfy ourselves. When the Lord is satisfied with us, we'll be satisfied. That is the secret of Bhakti Yoga. Outside of Bhakti Yoga, everyone's trying to satisfy themselves by sense gratification. No one's trying to satisfy the Lord. The karmis are trying to satisfy themselves by sense gratification. The jnanis are trying to satisfy themselves by subtle activities or mental speculation and thinking themselves to be God. And the yogis are also trying to satisfy themselves by thinking that they can achieve different mystic perfections. So really only the devotees are trying to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the devotee's process is completely different from the karmis, jnanis, and yogis. They're all trying to satisfy themselves, but the devotee is trying to only satisfy the Lord. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, the devotional process is completely different from the others. By working to please the Lord, by engaging his senses in the Lord's loving service, the devotee is immediately situated on the transcendental platform, and he enjoys unlimited blissful life. 15. The creation of the material world begins with the 5 elements, and thus everything, including the body of a man or a woman, is created of these elements. By the sexual life of man and woman, the number of men and women in this material world is further increased. So, okay, there's a purport here, a couple of paragraphs. So when Manu saw Dhruva, understood Vaishnava philosophy but was still dissatisfied because of his brother's death, so Swayambhuva Manu gave the following example of how the material body created by 5 elements of material nature. Bhagavad Gita 3.27 also confirms everything is created, maintained, and annihilated by the modes. In the background is the direction of the Lord. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita chapter 9, verse 10. So Manu's trying to show Dhruva that the death of his brother was not the yaksha's fault. It was the act of material nature. So the Lord has many potencies, and they act in gross and subtle ways. Second paragraph. By such powerful potencies, the universe is created, although grossly appears to be by the 5 elements, earth, water, fire, etc. Similarly, the bodies of all living entities, including humans and demigods, are created from the same 5 elements. By sexual union, they expand into more living entities. We shouldn't be disturbed by the ways of the material nature. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, Dhruva Maharaj was indirectly advised not to be afflicted by the death of his brother, because our relationship with the body is completely material. The real self, spirit soul, is never annihilated or killed by anyone. So verse 16, Manu continued, My dear King Dhruva, It is simply by the illusory material energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and by the interaction of the three modes of material nature that creation, maintenance, and annihilation take place. So let's have a look at the purport of verse 16. What is it? One paragraph, just one paragraph. So first the creation takes place with the five elements. Then, by the interaction of the modes, maintenance takes place. When a child is born, the parents immediately see to the child's maintenance. This tendency to maintain offspring is there with animals also. Even tigers maintain cubs, although they eat other animals. By the interaction of the modes, creation, maintenance, and annihilation take place inevitably. But at the same time, we must know that it's all conducted under the Lord. Creation is Rajagun, mode of passion. Maintenance is Sattvagun, mode of goodness. Annihilation is Tamagun, the mode of ignorance. And we see those in goodness live longer than those in passion and ignorance. So if you're in goodness, you'll be elevated to higher planets. Life there is much longer. The great rishis, sages, sannyasis maintain themselves in goodness and go to higher planets. Those who are transcendental even to goodness, they get eternal life in the spiritual world. Verse 17. My dear Dhruva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is uncontaminated by the material modes of nature. He is the remote cause of the creation of this material cosmic manifestation. When he gives the impetus, many other causes and effects are produced, and thus the whole universe moves, just as iron moves by the integrated force of a magnet. So Prabhupada says this verse explains how the external energy works in the material world. Everything's happening by the energy of the Lord. But the atheists think the world just moves by the actions and reactions of the material elements. An example is there, if you've ever tried it when you were at school, mixing soda with acid. Be very careful. Effervescence is produced. But you can't produce life like that. Some fizziness is produced. There are 8,400,000 species with different desires and actions, and you can't explain how it's working on the basis of chemical reactions. Prabhupada gives the example of the potter and his wheel. The wheel rotates and pots come out. There are many factors in the production, but the main one is the potter and the force he exists. That force comes by his superintendence. So same ideas in Bhagavad Gita. Behind all actions and reactions is Krishna. Krishna says everything depends on his mercy, but he's not everywhere. The pot produced under certain conditions of actions and reactions of material nature, but the potter is not in the pot. Right. Okay, so similarly, material creation is set up by the Lord, but he's aloof. The Vedas say he simply glanced over it, and the agitation of matter began. So there's a longer purport, second paragraph. Bhagavad Gita says the Lord impregnates the material energy with jivas, and different forms emerge because of different desires, different karmic activities of the living entity previously. Different types of bodies are produced. So Darwin's theory of evolution is incomplete, because there's no acceptance of the living entity as a spirit soul. Phenomena happens in the universe on basis of the modes, but the Lord is behind it all. He's nimitta matram. He pushes the wheel with his energy. So the Mayavadis say the Supreme Brahman has transformed itself into many varieties of forms, but this is not fact. He's always transcendental to actions, reactions of gunas, although his name is cause of all causes. So Brahma Samhita confirms this. Okay, so let's carry on. Verse 18. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, by his inconceivable supreme energy, time, causes the interaction of the three modes of material nature, and thus varieties of energy become manifest. It appears that he is acting, but he is not the actor. He is killing, but he is not the killing. Thus it is understood that only by his inconceivable power is everything manifest, is everything happening. Okay? So we have again another moderate type of purport. First paragraph. Prabhupada begins the purport by saying, the word durvibhavya means inconceivable in our tiny brain. And vibhaktavirya means divided in varieties of potencies. Prabhupada says this is the right explanation of the display of creative energies here. There's an example. The government is always meant to be merciful, but sometimes it has to use force through the police. And the police know it, that sometimes or other we're going to have to use force. It's going to get a little unpleasant. So similarly, the Lord is merciful, full of transcendental qualities, but some living entities are deviant. But it's incorrect to argue that because the energy comes from the Lord, he is the actor. In the previous verse, the word nimitta matram was used. It indicates he's aloof from actions and reactions of the material world. So how is everything being done? The word inconceivable is used. We can't comprehend it, so we have to use this word. So everything is set up by the Lord, but he is aloof from the actions and reactions. Prabhupada says, the varieties of energies produced by the interaction of material nature produce the varieties of species of life and their resultant happiness and unhappiness. How he acts, the Lord, is explained in Padma Purana as follows. Fire is in one place, but heat and light from it act differently. They can be transferred around, and they are. Another example, the powerhouse, electrical powerhouse is one place, but it makes machinery work everywhere. Prabhupada makes the point, the production is never identical with the original source of the energy, but the original source of the energy, being the prime factor, is simultaneously one with and different from the product. So Lord Chaitanya's philosophy of Achintya Bheda Bhed Tattva is the perfect way of understanding. So the Lord incarnates in forms of guna avatars, and through them he takes charge of the modes. But the original source of Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva, Garbhodakshai Vishnu, is always apart from these actions and reactions of material nature. So devotees, we'll finish here. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.